Hello there and welcome to this unreliable travel guide to the coronavirus of 2019-2020. I'm sitting here at Fremantle Port in Western Australia, and it feels like an appropriate place to have this conversation because ports have been places of transmission of illnesses or of diseases around the world for centuries, and it seems very likely that this port, not too far from where I'm sitting right now, the diseases that decimated the indigenous population of Western Australia in particular in the 19th century, it's most likely a lot of those arrived at this port. The reason I call this an unreliable travel guide is because I don't plan to give you any definitive recommendations about whether or not you should travel to Southeast Asia at this time. It seems to me that we don't have enough reliable information at the moment to make a really definitive assessment of the kind of risks that travellers are taking when they travel right now. But it's worth noting that travel is always a risky undertaking. It always has been and it always will be. And so we'll have a little conversation and try and make some sense of the kind of risks you might be exposing yourself to if you're planning to travel right now. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to try and run that risk analysis from Western Australia, so I headed back to Saigon for a look. One of the best things about Perth Airport is that it's pretty mellow even at the busiest of times. But last week when I left, it was very, very quiet. Staff working at the airport told me business was down 50, 60, 70%. I was flying with Scoot, which is a Singaporean budget carrier, and I had to overnight in Singapore on my way to Saigon. I was curious how my short stay in Singapore was going to feel, because this extremely successful, extremely affluent, extremely well organised state, with one of the best health systems in the region, has been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. A few days before my arrival, I watched the Singapore Prime Minister give a very impressive, very informative, very balanced account of the coronavirus to the Singapore people. It was very impressive because it both warned of the potential risks, but also urged calm and caution and explained what the government was doing. It seemed to have worked well. People were very conscious of the impact of the disease, but I didn't sense any panic. The airport actually felt very, very welcoming and seemed to be functioning very well. There were more people wearing masks on my flight from Singapore to Saigon than there were on the flight from Perth to Singapore, but everybody seemed pretty calm and relaxed, and the atmosphere was normal, or perhaps even a little better than normal. So it's good to be back in Saigon for a first-hand look at how things are holding up several weeks in to the coronavirus. I've been here for 3 or 4 days now, and I've got to say it's actually feeling really good. Obviously there's a lot of difficulty, a lot of businesses are under a lot of pressure, children are out of school, so a lot of families are having to work out how to deal with that. But as a selfish visitor, the city feels pretty relaxed. I'm told a few weeks ago people were a lot more uptight about things, but things feel pretty relaxed now. There's a good vibe to the city. The traffic is back about 30-40%. The pollution is well down, and it's amazing how those two things alone really change the atmosphere of the city. So it's a very nice time to be here as a visitor. It feels it's great walking around. I've taken a bunch of walks over the last few days, and I can definitely recommend being here at the moment. after a week of sort of relatively good news in terms of the spread of the disease, last weekend with news out of Korea and Italy was a bit troubling. While the world has been focused on the bad news coming out of Italy, Korea and Iran, Vietnam this week had some better news. The country declared all 16 of its 16 reported cases virus-free. Somehow, this developing country bordering China has so far contained local transmission of the coronavirus. There are areas still under quarantine. But for now at least, Vietnam seems to be in a good position, more than a month after the first case was diagnosed. Nobody's cracking open the champagne yet, and I haven't seen any reporting of this in international news. The weekend's news from Italy, Korea and Iran has amply demonstrated how quickly a region can be impacted. But there's definitely some cause for optimism. The other problem is that travellers are rightly concerned about the reliability of information they're receiving about the disease. That concern goes back to the initial cover-up in Wuhan and a general state of mistrust that seems to exist. That mistrust isn't helped by the fact that the President of the United States is very wary of experts and scientific advice, and people like my Prime Minister in Australia are also reluctant to heed the warnings of experts and scientists. Then there's the online space where companies like Facebook and Google have built a business model out of sowing discord and misinformation. The bar for transparency globally has been lowered. So it's a complicated time to be depending on unvarnished scientific data. But reality catches up, and you can't conceal widespread transmission of something like the coronavirus for more than a month. Vietnam's handling of the SARS crisis back in 2003 was widely praised. So what's going on? How has Vietnam been able to manage so well? Well, I haven't really seen any hard analysis of that yet, but perhaps the hot weather is playing its part in stopping local transmission. Experts have been speculating since the beginning of this virus that it's less likely to take root in hot climates like Vietnam, and that it would likely disappear during the northern summer. The fact that there have been no major outbreaks reported in Southeast Asia may support this idea. I say may only. There may be other factors, including a lower capacity to carry out widespread diagnostic work in these less developed countries. There's plenty we don't know, so I hope this first unreliable travel guide to the 2019 coronavirus has helped you with your deliberation. It's a really nice time to be here at the moment. It reminds me a little bit of the city 20 years ago. Winding back the traffic a little bit and winding back the pollution a little bit really makes a big difference to the atmosphere of this city. Tomorrow I'm going to head up to Hoi An and Da Nang for a look at how things are up there. Long one of my favourite places. Hoi An has been a little overrun by tourists in recent years, so I'm a little bit excited at the prospect of heading there during a quieter time. But of course, you've always got in the back of your mind the fact that the quieter times spell hardship for so many businesses as well. I'll post another update from Hoi An later in the week. Let's hope the global news starts to improve, and let's hope Vietnam's situation continues along its current track as well. Thank you.